All right, everyone. Welcome to the Conscious Resistance Live. My name is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. If you can hear me okay, please give me a thumbs up, give me a smile, give me a comment, give me something to let me know that you can hear me before I just start rambling on and talking to myself. What's up, Ford? And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll be posting links to you guys. If you're watching through Facebook, I will be sharing my screen with you as we go over a couple of different issues tonight. We're going to be talking, what do I got written down? We're going to be talking some 5G news. We're going to be talking government shutdown. We're going to be talking a recent slew of lawsuits related to surveillance. We're going to be talking about Facebook, about the recent rules regarding genetically modified foods from the USDA, and we'll be talking Syria as well. So lots to cover tonight. And of course, any questions, comments you guys got. All right, cool. I'm getting confirmation from both places I sound all right. Thank you guys. And I do want to let you guys know, if you're watching on Facebook, this is the last live broadcast I will be doing on Facebook. I left Facebook, my personal profile, back in April, and we are shutting down operations, you could say, on the Conscious Resistance Facebook page as of January 2019. I'm not going to shut the pages down. I'm going to leave it up there so people can still find the old content. And same thing for Twitter and those kinds of things, Instagram, but I'm not going to be posting anymore on those networks as of 2019. I'm going to be only focusing on promoting my website, theconsciousresistance.com, getting people to sign up for email newsletters and for my text list, and also using other decentralized platforms. And I will continue to use YouTube for the time being. But yeah, so if you're on Facebook, this is my last broadcast, and we're going to get into some of why you should reconsider being on Facebook. And I've listened to lots of different arguments to from my various friends, and honestly, I have a fake profile that allows me to communicate with some people via Facebook. So I peek in every now and then, and I see what my friends are up to, and I see other activists and friends I know, like Ford, for example, who's watching via Facebook, who are still having reach and still connecting with people and still getting hundreds of likes and interactions and getting people to think. And I pause sometimes. I'm like, did I make a mistake? Did I make a mistake? Because I didn't just deactivate my account. I deleted the Derrick Broze account that had 9 years worth of activism and posts and all kinds of stuff, just getting questions and getting people to think about things and positive affirmations, and it's all gone, right? But overall, as I will discuss tonight, I do think that it was the right move for me personally, because I personally, and maybe it's different for everybody, I was allowing myself to get too sucked into it and spending too much time debating people. And sometimes debates obviously can have value and can be important and can be effective and useful. Other times it's just bullshit and it's a waste of your time, and there's things like that. So there was that aspect for me of just spending too much of my time when I in a way that's not very effective. But then also for me, on principle, I don't want to continue to support Facebook because of just their business practices, and we're going to talk about some of that tonight. In the second or third story, when we get into some of these surveillance lawsuits that have been filed in the last couple of weeks, one of them regarding Facebook stealing what's known as your face print. And I talked about that a couple years back, but that lawsuit's still making traction and it's still making the news. So for a variety of reasons, I will no longer be using Facebook in a number of days. So you have a few days if you want to continue to see our new content to sign up at theconsciousresistance.com, bookmark our page, or just follow us on minds.com, follow us on MeWe, follow us on Steemit or on BitChute. There's tons of other ways to support and to keep up to date with what we're doing. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let's start moving. Let's start getting into the stories that we're going to cover. The first thing I want to touch on tonight relates to what I've been covering in recent weeks that many of you have reacted fairly well to, and that is 5G. That is the continued investigation into the fight to, I would say, not for me personally to completely just ban or stop the rollout of 5G, but at the very least to get people to question it, to think about it, and to ask why it's taking place, why the federal government is in charge of this rollout of fifth generation cell phone technology, because these are the arguments I can make for any sort of critically thinking person. There are the health arguments that can be made, and some people, they don't think those are real or valid, or there's no concern there, so they reject those, right? So you can reject those if you like, but we have the surveillance, the privacy concerns, right? So there are those, so you can take that approach if you choose. But what about the just general self-ownership aspect of this whole thing? Like the fact that the mayor unilaterally cut a deal with a private corporation. In this case, we have Verizon in Houston, and it's different corporations in different cities. And there was no vote from the people. There was no environmental impact study, no health assessment. There was no comment period. There was nothing. It was just simply, we're going to cut a deal with Verizon, and now everybody's going to have to deal with the implications of that. And that's because why? Because they want to be the futuristic city that has driverless cars and robot assistants. So they don't care about private property. They don't care about your health concerns, because if you don't know, this 5G rollout is taking place. Some people in some cities are actually getting the small cells which help with 5G. They're not necessarily like big towers, but they can be the size of a backpack or the size of a refrigerator. They're putting them on poles, sometimes like 30 feet outside of somebody's home. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you see what it's come to, and it's because the FCC, a few months back, and we reported on this, that the FCC passed a rule which essentially said that the federal government has complete control over the rollout of 5G, and that the local governments can't stop it, basically. So when I go to city council and I question the mayor about this, he tells me, well, I love 5G. And he loves 5G so much that the CTIA, which was formerly known as the Cellular Telephone Internet Association, it's just the lobby for the telecom industry, for big wireless, you could say. They gave him the 5G Wireless Champion Award back in September. And then by the time I appeared there at city council in October, and I continued to question him the last couple months, he doesn't want to ask anything. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to have anything to say. You know, he's just don't go. Let's not go there, right? Basically. So my point is, whether or not you have the health concerns, or whether your concerns are related to privacy or just the self-ownership aspect that they're just shoving this on people, or you could also take the argument that this is a corporate takeover of the infrastructure that's going to be so important. It's all of these things at once, right? These are all the concerns I have: health concerns, privacy concerns, my self-ownership, as well as the fact that, yes, if 5G is to take place, or all these futuristic technologies, these corporations are already getting a monopoly set in place, and they're doing it with the help of the federal government. Surprise, surprise. And the local governments that are resisting or do have questions, not what's happening here in Houston, they really can't even resist it because of this FCC ruling. So I put this little write-up here together for those of you guys who are watching my screen on Facebook. You can see it. It's called "Why Won't Houston's Mayor Sylvester Turner Answer Questions About 5G?" And it basically, I had my friend Jason from the Free Thought Project put together this meme, which we shared on Facebook and Minds.com and everywhere else. And it says, July 2018, Houston's Mayor Sylvester Turner announces 5G partnership with Verizon. September 2018, Mayor Turner receives 5G Wireless Champion Award from Big Telecom. And then it shows a picture of me at City Council and says, October 2018, Mayor Turner refuses to answer questions about 5G health concerns. Still think government represents you? Obviously not. Most of my audience is kind of past that delusion, thinking that government actually represents your interests, or that they truly care. So I just put together a little list here. This is some bullet points of the reports about health concerns, about privacy concerns, and lots of things that anyone who wants to get into this, who wants to dive into this, from doctors, from Michigan state senators, from the FCC themselves, Connecticut State Senator Richard Blumenthal, the Washington, D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissions. There are a variety of people who are asking these questions. It's not just one crazy man, as some people would like to dismiss this. You know, there's people on YouTube, they want to dismiss this as just, we're all just crazy conspiracy theorists. There's nothing to see here, right? But when you really start to dig into this and read these things, like a lot of these situations, you find that there is something to it. There's something to be concerned about. Questions need to be asked, right? I don't like to conclusively come in here and say that, you know, this is one way or the other, but I think it's important for us to ask questions, right? And I've said this in past videos, my friends, that if you're out there and you're concerned about 5G, and you've also done other research where you understand the potential for some of these technologies to be used to influence, I hate to say it because people think it's a weird word, it's a weird phrase, but mind control. And if you don't think mind control exists, you can go back and you can look up and see a Scientific American article from just a couple years ago talking about how cell phones could be used to influence thoughts and essentially control the mind in some way, right? So my point is that there are people who have concerns that 5G is the grid is being set up because it's going to be some mass mind control experiment in the future or something like that, right? Or, the only, finally it's time for our tinfoil hats, this kind of thinking. Well, look, I may be able to sit around at a campfire at night and have that discussion with you and say, hey, these are possibilities that may exist, and let's like shoot the shit and kind of think through these things and have some thought experiments. But when you're trying to wake someone up or inform somebody, especially let's say like a more mainstream person, you don't start by saying 5G is being put in place so that they can control your mind. I mean, you start however you want, but don't expect to be taken seriously by most people unless they're already, ready to go there, right? So my point is, we have to find ways to communicate effectively if we actually care. If we're not just going out there and flailing about and just screaming like, the sky is falling. But if you, like myself, got into this or became aware and decided, I need to wake up other people, I need to help other people see these things, then I think it's important for us to try to be effective in the way we communicate these things, right? So that's all I'm saying. Like, let's just be thoughtful and mindful with what we're promoting out there and what we're putting in front of people. Because if we want them to listen to us, we really want them to pay attention to what we're saying. By the way, that story I was just talking about, it can be found on theconsciousresistance.com. I just posted it yesterday. And I want to just, one other thing on 5G and then we'll move on. Just something that was brought to my attention a couple of weeks ago, but I hadn't had a chance to really look at it. Some of you may have heard this. And this, I think, goes to my last point, that look, whether or not you're concerned about the health concerns, the privacy concerns, or the self-ownership aspect of the 5G struggle here, it is abundantly clear that what we're really dealing with here is an effort by corporations to take over the infrastructure of the future, basically. And this was actually pointed out in Harvard, I think it's a Harvard study it's called Captured Agency, how the FCC with the Federal Communications Commission, which is, of course, who's supposed to be in charge of regulating the rollout of 5G as well as other infrastructure. And I'll have you know this, Trump supporters, that a couple months back in October, whenever my local mayor here in Houston was being awarded the 5G Wireless Champion Award by the telecom industry because they said he removed all restrictions and sped the permit process along. When he was doing that, Donald Trump was issuing an executive order doing the same thing on the federal level, saying that we need to not stand in the way of the 5G rollout. We need to make sure that the telecoms can get it done. So from the federal to the local level, this is taking place. So this report was published by the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard University, and it's called Captured Agency, how the FCC is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And it's just a study on what it sounds like, how big wireless is being compared to big tobacco, and how the studies and the effects of the tobacco industry was able to buy off doctors, was able to use marketing and advertising to convince just generations of people that cigarettes were safe and okay, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. So what's being argued here is that this is what's taking place in the same industry, right? This is what's going on in the wireless industry. If you don't know about this, then I'll post this link to you guys. But as I said, it's coming from the ethics school at Harvard, Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard University. Captured Agency, how the FCC is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. So we'll check that one out, and you can get up to date on that, because it's like I said, that it's so obvious that it's nothing new. I mean, I don't know why really we should be surprised in any way, and we shouldn't be surprised. That's the truth of the matter. Don't be surprised. It's just par for the course that corporations and government have a revolving door relationship. This is something I talked about on my tour this summer when I gave a 2-hour presentation called The Pyramid of Power, discussing how this pyramid exists from the corporate media to the education system to the banking system, just all the various aspects of it. And it comes down to this corporations versus government. Some people say that it's just the corporations. Some people say it's just the government, but it's a symbiotic relationship between the two. They are essentially have become one, but it's not necessarily one or the other. It's a shared relationship that they use their power and their ability and their network to bombard us with not only heavy negative news and just a culture that is about distraction and about not having no values other than just party for the moment, live for the moment, and ignore any sort of future, right? It's just this mindlessness that they're promoting through all of the corporate media that they work, so you have to understand this web of people, this network, what I call the pyramid of power, to really understand the infrastructure that we're dealing with. So it's not just the telecom industry. The telecom industry is a bigger part of what some people are calling the big tech industry, which is like Google and all those companies that we're going to get into. And they're a part of a larger infrastructure, and they're also working and have government contracts and government relationships. And obviously, as I said, the FCC, these government agencies, they're willing to just step out of the way or to work directly with these people to get the issues that they want done and to implement the policies that they want. It's not about you. It's not about me. I don't know if this is all, everybody in the room, everybody listening is kind of like, yeah, duh, Derek, we get it. But I mean, I'm just saying, if everybody's listening and this is new information to you, like, you have to accept that the people in power don't care about you. And I'm not saying your local senator can't necessarily be a good guy, or the local councilman, or even a senator here or there, but far and wide, like, they are all bought and sold. And I guarantee you, anybody who makes it to the presidency, I don't care what you have to say, anybody who makes it as far as the presidency has been bought and sold, has already been shown what they have to do, what game they have to play in order to be able to play that role. Because you don't get that high up in there. There's no such thing as a fucking anti-establishment candidate coming in out of nowhere and surprising everybody. Like, that's a part of the whole media scheme. I don't get how so many people bought this. It's just funny to me. Like, people realize how controlled the media is, and then all of a sudden the media tells them, we hate this person is bad, and they believe it and they buy into it, and like, if the media doesn't like him, this must mean he's good. Oh, so that's who I should pay attention to. Never stopping to think, maybe this is a part of their whole charade too. It is a reality show. Like, if it should be more clear than ever. Oh yeah. All right. So let's talk about the government shutdown. And I put that in quotations, government shutdown, because as we're going to talk about in just a moment, the real parts of government that maybe we want to shut down, they never shut down, right? That's never on the table. And instead, what we have going on here is just this continued distraction shit show that the mainstream always is, especially anytime it involves Donald Trump. And so here we go. This is from The Hill, just reported earlier today. Trump threatens to close the southern border entirely if the Democrats don't fund the wall. So let's get into this. Again, The Hill is mainstream press centered around D.C. It says President Trump on Friday threatened to close the southern border entirely if Democrats do not agree to provide money to finish building a wall on the Mexican border. Trump made the threat as a partial government shutdown enters its 7th day with no end in sight. Now listen to the language that they put here, right? Because I just want to preface this with saying, if you go back about 10 years, maybe even less, these government shutdowns didn't happen every year. And some people basically are saying like, well, that's because the parties have become less and less willing to compromise, and there's more and more divisiveness in the nation. So this is happening more often. The two parties can't come to an agreement. So shutdown is always looming now. For my take, I'd say that this is all part of their game, again, with that low energy, that fear-based programming, trauma-based programming, to constantly keep us thinking like, oh my God, the government's about to end. What? The government's going to shut down? And the average person has no understanding of what that really even means, because what most people recognize is that generally, for most of us, unless you are completely dependent on government services, which there are some people who are, then the government doesn't really affect you. It doesn't play a role in your life on a day-to-day basis. Yes, I will say I think it said a few 100,000 people who are out of a job because of this current shutdown, but the vast majority of the government continues to be open and is not affected by this at all, right? So in my view, this is just part of their BS that they've been running for years now to try to keep us in that state of fear. Like, oh my God, the government's going to shut down. Or the two-party, they just want you to be so panicky. Just like some of you may know, I put a video out a couple days ago called Don't Fall for the Civil War Deception. And I was calling out Alex Jones and InfoWars and really anybody who's out there helping promote this propaganda. I see it from left and from right and from everybody in between. And it's okay to ask these questions, but when you start to see it over and over and over, and you start to see things like, oh, government shutdown. And let me go back to The Hill. They said Trump made threat as a partial government shutdown enters its 7th day with no end in sight. There's no end in sight, right? Okay, well then we hop over here to this Reuters article, which is a little bit more accurate, and it's titled "How a Government Shutdown, Partial Shutdown of U.S. Government Could Play Out," and it's basically saying because Trump wants money for the wall, there's this battle going on, and that this could last throughout the week. Trump says he's prepared for a lengthy shutdown, but how long could the government actually shut down? So we have 800,000 employees of the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, Agriculture, Commerce, and other agencies who are currently out of jobs for the moment and won't go back until there's something figured out, right? So I guess I feel for those who are out of jobs because it's probably affecting real people and real families. But at the same time, like, I don't know. I get why people think like, oh, government jobs, that's security. There's always going to be a government. There's always going to be a job. But you know what? Fuck you. Because if you keep participating in that system, and I will say, I've had people come to me and say, I used to work for, this agency, or I used to work as a private intelligence, this and that. And they had a wake up experience and they left because they couldn't do it anymore. So for those people, I'm thankful. For those of you who, we all make our own choices. I don't want to sit here and judge necessarily, but I do think that we have to start living by principles holistically. We have to think, not just about talking online about being principled and waking people up, but actually living every aspect of your life in line with and where you get your money from. It matters. You know what I mean? Like it's, if you're taking a check from the CIA, even if you use it for good, I'd say that, yeah, okay, but you're working with the CIA. You're working with them who are taking government money that's stolen from the people, and it's the fucking CIA. You know what I mean? Like it's not justified. So my point here is I feel on the human level for the people who are not at work right now and how that might be affecting their families. But at the same time, we need to let's let it all fall down as far as I'm concerned. And now here's the key part. Most of the federal government, which directly employs about almost 4 million people, is unaffected. The Defense Department, the Energy Department, the Labor Department, and other departments are funded at least through September 30th of next year, 2019. The Defense Department, most importantly, these are the people who are dropping bombs and who have bases all over the world. Yeah, those people, they're funded for at least another year, and they're not, that's not stopping anytime soon. So, and also the thing about, like I said, the Hill said with no end in sight, but in reality, the Democrats are about to take over in the new year. And so they're going to be taking over on January 3rd. That's whenever the 2019-2020 Congress will take over, and the control of the House will switch from the Republicans to the Democrats. And at that time, Nancy Pelosi is expected to take over as House Speaker, and they're saying that they're going to take swift action to reopen the government. And it says, unless there's some type of deal, the House Democrats will vote on a funding bill on January 3rd. And in that case, the Republicans, they will need to get some Democrats on their side if they actually want to stop this legislation. More than likely, they won't be able to stop the legislation. And it says if it passes and passes the House, and wins support in the Senate, then it goes to Trump. And then Trump will have a decision. He can either back down and support the bill and not get funding for his wall because they're not going to give it to him, or he can veto the bill and single-handedly continue the shutdown himself. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, like I said, I think most of this is just garbage anyways, just fear porn that they want us to be worried about, because as this little meme I found on Facebook shows, it says in a kind of silly way, in 1/2 hour, the whole government will stop. Well, except for the bomby parts and the surveilly parts and the arresty parts and the corporate welfare parts and the deportee parts and the search and siege parts and the bill collector parts and the foreign coup parts and the Congress paycheck parts. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, all of the worst parts of this government continue to exist and operate and are not slowing down in any way. And that's just how these things operate. That's how it is. It's, they can tell us to be afraid because the government's going to collapse. But in reality, all the things that we would like to end, the destruction, the war, the bombing, the surveillance, all those things will continue. And that's just the reality. So when they tell you the government's about to shut down, yes, some real people will be affected. Maybe some parks will get closed. Maybe certain things will get closed temporarily. But we have to find ways to fund and empower ourselves, I think, without depending on the government and what they represent, which is violence and force and coercion. No matter what apparent good they do, it's done through extortion. So it's not moral. It's not just. Now, I want to move on to a couple of lawsuits that I found that relate to surveillance. And they're coming from I think all three of them actually might be coming from the American Civil Liberties Union, which, I know some people out there don't like the ACLU because they tend to lean left on some issues, but generally they tend to be in defense of people's free speech, and they do a lot of good work around surveillance. So I support that. This article right here says, we're suing the government to learn its rules for when it hacks into people's devices. And this is again from the ACLU. And it says, hacking by the government raises grave privacy concerns, creating surveillance possibilities that were previously the stuff of science fictions. And now this is the important part. Again, this is probably 101 to some of my audience, but others, just in case you forgot, because so many things happen in our world. That's why I do a weekly 1-hour show. It's so many things happening that it's hard to keep up. You may have forgotten that the government, different agencies of the government have the ability to hack into your phone, your laptop, or any other digital devices. And the federal agents who do so can, or local agents, whoever do this, can obtain all kinds of sensitive, confidential information. They can even activate a device's camera, microphone, log keystrokes, or otherwise hijack all of your functions. And indeed, as we know through some of the leaked documents from Edward Snowden and from WikiLeaks and others, that even when you turn off your microphone and turn off your location, they have ways to remotely turn it back on, but without the button appearing to be on. I mean, anytime we use these devices, I'm broadcasting to YouTube through a smartphone that I use. I have a webcam, right? While it's connected, somebody could hijack the signal. Obviously, I'm broadcasting live, but as long as it's plugged in, somebody could remotely tune in. That's why you're supposed to unplug all your webcams when you're not using them. Cover up your microphones, cover up your cameras and all that good stuff. But so the ACLU on Friday, they, along with Privacy International and the University at Buffalo's Law School for Civil Liberties and Transparency, filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit demanding disclosure of basic information about government hacking. They said they're suing 7 federal, criminal, and immigration enforcement agencies, including the FBI, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Drug Enforcement Administrations. So they are going after 7 different federal agencies to see what they have, and I guess we'll see how that goes. But I just wanted to bring that one to your attention. I have a couple more here. This one, and I will post all these on YouTube, I promise, guys. It's kind of hard running these all at once. So this one, it comes from the ACLU as well, and it says the ACLU sues government to learn about NSA call records program. Yes, again, in case you didn't know, the NSA, they like to tell us that this surveillance stopped when they passed something called the USA Freedom Act, just like they called the USA Patriot Act. These things have this Orwellian names when in reality they do nothing of the sort. They don't protect us, or they offer like half measures that don't really do anything and are ineffective. So now the ACLU is suing the NSA, the National Security Agency, the Director of the National Intelligence, the CIA, and the Justice Department in a Manhattan federal court seeking information about a program that collects records during investigations into terrorism or clandestine intelligence activities. According to the lawsuit, the government has not responded to requests made last month for information about its surveillance of Americans under a 2015 law. And as I said, Congress used this law to set boundaries on the NSA's bulk collection of call records. This was the USA Freedom Act, which they said, well, this is the response to Edward Snowden's leak. It led to this passing of the Freedom Act, and yay, we actually got some effect, similar to the GMO law we're going to talk about in a moment. People did march against Monsanto and fought for awareness, and then all of a sudden they reward us with what? Well, here's your victory. Here's a federal labeling law where we can be in control of what is labeled one way or the other, right? That's how they like to do things, is give us these faux victories, and also, just generally dilute us, I think. So what else does it say here? The lawsuit, the government has not responded to the requests. The law requires annual reports to Congress from the intelligence community and forces the government to seek a court order to collect call records. So even though it's supposed to force them to report to the government and obtain a court order and yada, 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 they have not done so. They're not regularly doing this, and the limits on surveillance are due to expire in 2019, and the ACLU says more information is needed for a healthy debate before the law is reauthorized or changes are made. So that's another important one, right? Then this third one that I have here, and this leads me into my little rant that we're going to get into on why you should seriously consider dropping Facebook. Because if you're not using Facebook, if you're using Facebook, even if like I said earlier, I have friends who I look on their Facebook profiles like, wow, they're still getting a pretty good reach. They're still having some success. But overall, though, the independent media, the alternative media activists have suffered. Facebook has gone after many of us. And typically it's those of us who are anti-war, anti-censorship, who didn't buy into the Russian bot stuff. They leave up the extreme Trump supporters and they leave up the extreme left. But those of us who have not bought into the second layer of the left-right paradigm, because it's funny, like you have the mainstream left-right paradigm, people start waking up. I've been working on this essay forever called The 5 Layers of Deception to kind of like flesh out this idea. But generally you have people who start waking up and they like, oh, I thought I was a Republican or I thought I was a Democrat, but then I realized they're both BS, or that, there's very the same. So you get past that, and then you get a little bit more awake, right? And then all of a sudden, some of the people, they fell for it again, and they fell for like, oh, let's go to be Trump supporters, or this way, and it's only the left that's the problem. It's those leftist SJWs, yada yada yada. And then you got the other extreme. It's like, no, it's the conservatives are turning nationalists. And I'm not saying that either side doesn't have arguments, because they both do, but it's just a second layer of division. It's the second layer of division from Republican Democrat to alt-right, or Antifa, or just extreme right, extreme left. And we got to get past all that. And even in the anarchist movement, it's this, there's are you this or this? And it's just constantly these false dichotomies that are put before us in order to divide us. All right, I kind of started going off on a tangent here. My point was that we can use the tools to connect with people, but we have to be able to stand by our principles. You know what I mean? Like, I want to use the tools, but I don't want to be supporting a company that goes against my values. As this lawsuit right here illustrates, the ACLU is now arguing that Facebook should face privacy lawsuits over face prints. Like I said, your face print, right? Every time you went and posted a selfie, I'm included in this, posted a selfie on Facebook, right? And you posted that on there. In that fine print that none of us read, it says that Facebook now owns your face, what they call a face print, which can then be sold to all kinds of companies who have an interest in biometrics, who have an interest in just, cataloging faces for video. I mean, all kinds of reasons, right? So unfortunately, most states, though, don't have laws against this, against the stealing of your biometric data in the form of your face print, except for Illinois. Illinois definitely does have one. And Illinois residents in 2015 filed a class action complaint that said that Facebook's faceprint database violated a state law that regulates the collection and use of biometric data. And that 10-year-old law is one of the strongest privacy laws in the country, and it requires companies to obtain written releases from people before collecting face geometry and other biometric data. And this battle centers on Facebook's photo tagging function. So again, this is why in my documentary, which if you haven't seen, go visit theconsciousresistance.com, search The Modern Surveillance State, and you can see our documentary we released a couple months ago. Even if you think you know everything about surveillance, I promise you'll learn something. You might have heard of a project that was started by DARPA, the part of the government that's always working on crazy things. They had this project called LifeLog, and LifeLog was going to log and catalog all of our different relationships, and said all intersecting relationships between people. And that they were developing this project for a few years. This is in the early 2000s, right? And interestingly enough, the day that LifeLog announced the end of the LifeLog project was the same day that Facebook went live in 2006. And when you look at the way that DARPA describes their goals for LifeLog, and you look at what Facebook has become, it's pretty obvious that they're connected. And we do know that there is at least some slight connection between funding from the CIA's venture fund In-Q-Tel and Facebook's funding. There's some connections there. So my point here is they built this tool to put it out into the masses, for us to put everything that we like on there, to put all of our faces in there, all of our locations. And you have to think and understand this, like, that the reason that Trump was able to win so effectively, and they used Trump as a pawn in the grander scheme, because everybody that makes it to president is selected. All presidents are selected. The elections don't matter. Stop thinking that you had an effect. You didn't have an effect. This is all pre-planned. But people like Steve Bannon and others, anybody now who has access, who can go buy this data from Facebook, say through companies like Cambridge Analytica, they can get access to all sorts of analytics about people around anywhere in the country. They can look up, say, for example, all the data of what people's favorite food is in the city of Houston, right? And then they can put out a marketing campaign targeted to those people, right? I mean, there's just so much you can do. Obviously, you can affect elections. So any candidate with enough money can buy this data now from companies like Facebook and the companies that work with them, or these other social media tools where we have given up all of our details, and it's valuable. And they use that then to market shit back to you, to sell things to you, to predict. They've admitted that they can predict on Facebook when you're going to start a relationship before you do. They know this. So it's just, I understand the effectiveness aspect of it, where people are like, well, I'm still reaching people, but I think that it's much deeper. This particular rabbit hole goes much deeper than we may even realize, and it's important for us to question it, to not. And as I've said before, look, if we're the kind of people that reject the mainstream media, right, and we're suspect and we're suspicious of the mainstream culture, be it movies or TV shows or just different aspects that we see for propaganda in, then why would we blindly accept the mainstream forms of social media that have been handed to us? The whole world is the stage, and if something is this big and bold, where they have more than 1 billion people in the world on this one tool, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason Facebook hasn't gone down, and I don't know that there's going to be anything else that will take it down unless that's planned and designed. But I know that better alternatives already exist. And yes, I hear the argument that, well, if we all go there, then we're only just going to be preaching to the choir, right? Because you guys pretty much know most of the things I'm talking about. Maybe you learn some new things, or it's just interesting to you. But we're trying to reach new people. We have to constantly grow, right, and expand. And that's going to happen. But we're really breaking off now into two different types of internet here, where there's going to be this controlled, mainstream, diluted internet where you can have extreme left and extreme right. If they'll let the divisive stuff stay, and they'll have all the mainstream and maybe some accepted independent media, but there will probably be a separated, more decentralized, blockchain-based internet where the rest of us who want to be off of that controlled internet are, and we probably will be in our own sort of digital isolated island. But that will be the only way to communicate effectively, because if you see what's taking place in China, then you can understand what the United States wants to do in the United States. They have controlled access to everything online. To get online in China, you have to log in, right? And they can track all of your data. And if we all know they have the social credit system, which is coming to Venezuela soon, and it's going to come to the U.S. along with the 5G grid. All of these things are converging together, right? So when you put that together, and you put together this facial recognition database that the FBI has, you put together the fact that the TSA is saying in order to fly in the United States by 2020, they're going to have to be able to scan your face, or retina scan, or thumbprint. And then you understand that companies like Facebook are out there just taking people's facial data. It's quite clear we are living in that digital dystopia. It's not that it's off in the distance. It's already here. We're just about it's going to be revealed, I think, for what it truly is in the next couple of years. And so that was kind of a long-winded rant here, but this lawsuit that I was talking about is the ACLU basically saying that the courts need to continue to stand by Illinois and essentially maybe open Facebook up to other lawsuits for taking people's face prints. And then the other thing to remember is last week there was another story about Facebook, and they're constantly coming out. I don't know what it will take. People just don't. It's like people are desensitized now. Like, oh, by the way, Facebook had all your photos and they were sharing them with people, all kinds of different websites. I don't know if any of you caught that story. And ABC News here reports Twitter and Snapchat store unposted photos too. That's, again, why as of January 2019, my Twitter account will not be used anymore. My Facebook account. This is the last live broadcast to you guys on Facebook, so I hope you are enjoying this. Instagram, no more. All of these, I'm going to stop using them, and I'm only going to use these others. And if that isolates me, then so be it, because I can't condone, and I don't want to be an example of somebody who just keeps using these things. I don't know. For me, the good doesn't outweigh the bad, in this case. And maybe I'm just being silly or unreasonable or something, but that's what I'm feeling. And I think that in the long term, my efforts will be rewarded. And I just want to remind you guys, I actually wrote an article back in September 2017 called "Why Are We Still Using Facebook?" And it's on Activist Post. And it was basically me looking at several different studies. This is another aspect, okay? Besides stealing your data and all those aspects, it's already been shown in various studies that Facebook specifically, they did a study where they looked at the internet and people's use of the internet and then people's use of Facebook specifically. And Facebook on its own produced depression, feelings of loneliness, feelings of envy, over and over. There's been so many studies. There was a study by the University of Michigan, passive Facebook usage undermines effective well-being. In the study, students were randomly assigned to read Facebook for 10 minutes. The students who only scrolled reported feeling in a worse mood by the end of the day. And obviously some of these studies, they need to go deeper, but there's more than one. There's a number of studies who've been reported over the years just talking about the way people are affected by Facebook. This one, 2014, published in Computers and Human Behavior, says studies Facebook's emotional consequences, why Facebook causes a decrease in mood, and why people still use it. And then we also, I know you guys have seen the clip of Sean Parker, who was Facebook's first president, speaking and basically saying what he said. His quote was that they built a feedback loop so that people would constantly want to come back for the likes and that endorphin rush. And I realized that this is one of the reasons I did leave Facebook too, because I realized I was like constantly checking it and I was getting sucked into this feedback loop of wanting the, the interaction with you guys. Like, oh, did they like my comments enough? Like, is it getting enough shares? And obviously for me, it's not just about like my vanity. It's more like, cool, is that information getting shared? Is that article? Is that documentary? But still, it's this addictive thing that, I don't know, as somebody who's been addicted to drugs, I think it's definitely something to be careful with, man. That's all I can really say. So I've been warning about this for a while. I deleted my personal profile in April. We're going to stop using this. I saw the question from Rika a while back. Yes, I will. I did agree just last week. I caved to some of you guys on YouTube. I take full responsibility that I will continue to use YouTube for the moment. I'm making a compromise. I'm making an exception only because YouTube has been growing vastly more than any of these other platforms at the moment. And I at least want to get the Finders documentary out before I stop posting on YouTube and get that fully released, which, by the way, the Finders documentary will be out the first week of January, just a few more days. So, yeah. All right. We're at 40 minutes. I got two more stories that I want to cover, the GMO one, and then possibly we'll talk about Syria. And then we're going to end with a short talk on self-ownership. Keep your phones away from your crotch. Absolutely. That's a good idea. All right, this next story here, I want to say is, again, an example of what I was talking about a couple of moments ago, where people put up a fight and they righteously come to the streets, or they're angry and they're upset about an issue, and they push for a solution, and the people in control, the state and their corporate partners, they offer a solution. They say, okay, well, you guys marching against Monsanto, you're concerned about the bees, you're concerned about the pesticides, you're concerned about genetically engineered food, or about the corporatism, or you just don't like Monsanto poisoning the planet, whatever. Well, we'll give you something. And you may remember that in late 2016, before Obama left the office, this Food Labeling Act, GMO Food Labeling Act, was passed, and Obama signed it, and it was promoted in the mainstream as a victory for the people. Of course, the opposite is always true. And in fact, among activist circles, it was called the Deny Americans the Right to Know Act, or the DARK Act. The reason is, although this is a labeling bill technically, what it does is it circumvents local power and state power and says that the federal government gets to decide the standard for what all labeling of genetically engineered, genetically modified foods will be. So there was already certain states like Vermont and others who had passed their own state legislation. There were some counties, there were some cities that were just deciding what they wanted to do about labeling, the way it should be, where you should have some say in what your local community was about. That's like kind of foundational here in the United States. The federal government shouldn't be coming into your community and telling you what kind of sticker you can put on your food or something like that. I mean, but that's what they've done. And so again, they say, well, you're going to get labeling, but we'll do it for you, and we get to decide what gets labeled and what doesn't get labeled, and even what wording gets on there and what the colors are and all that kinds of stuff. And of course, that's going to produce great results because the federal government has such a great track record. So they finally released, after a couple of years of going back and forth, the USDA released their new rule for GMO labeling. We already knew this. I've talked about this in past episodes. Some of you may remember that they were getting rid of the GMO or GE label, genetically engineered, genetically modified, and they retermed it bioengineered. So now the labeling, the terminology that people have become used to is not going to exist anymore. It's just going to be called bioengineered foods, and it's going to have a little cutesy green and yellow label on it. But one of the big complaints, this is why they're calling it the DARK Act, is because when you go to the store, there's going to be one of those QR codes, like this QR code kind of thing. So there'll be a QR code on the food product. You have to have a smartphone and a certain app in order to scan it, and then it'll tell you information about. So not only is it the government taking control and they're going to tell you what's safe and what's not if you want to trust them, but the complaints that people are saying is, well, what about those who are too poor to afford smartphones, or don't have internet access or you don't have a phone, then how are they going to be able to scan this thing and get information that they need? So they're making it extremely difficult for people who either don't have the technology or who are poor or just technology or illiterate, like let's say an older grandmother or something who wants to know what she wants to eat. So we've known that for a while. That's why they call it the Dark Act. But now the USDA announced that it said that foods that contain detectable genetic material that only foods that contain detectable genetic material should be considered as bioengineered or genetically modified. And this means that refined products like soybean oil and corn sweeteners, which have genetically engineered products in them, will not be labeled. So this means like sugar beets. If you don't know, in the United States, a lot of like if you have a sweetener and it's coming from beets, sugar beets, a lot of times that's genetically modified sugar beets. They won't have to label that. So if your drink is being, sweetened with genetically modified beets, then you won't be aware of that, and whether you want to or not. It says that the beets themselves are bioengineered, but once that they're refined into sugar, there are no longer any traces of the genetically engineered or genetically modified or bioengineered ingredients. It says the sugar molecules look no different than sugar made from non-GMO sugar cane, and this beet sugar is used to make everything from candy, bread, and like I said, it's sweetener. I've seen it in a lot of cranberry juice. They use like beet sweetener. Well, you will not know in the future, in the coming years, whether or not that was sweetened with genetically modified beets. And then I have an article here from EcoWatch. EcoWatch calls this a disaster. Critics blast new GMO labeling rule from Trump's FDA. And a lawyer with the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy said, quote, "It is obvious that this rule is intended to hide, not disclose information about genetically modified foods." And also Andrew Kimbrell, who's the director at Center for Food Safety, says the USDA's prohibition of the well-established terms GE and GMO on food labels will confuse and mislead consumers. So, I mean, any way you slice it, this is, again, federal government takeover of the food supply. And we've known this is going on. Companies like Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow Chemical, the chemical companies working together with the corporation and with the governments to take over the food supply. The health industry and the telecom industry is being taken over by the corporations working with their partners in the government from local to federal. I mean, I put out a video earlier today, talking about my idea for intentional community, and I expressed why I plan to leave the United States by the end of 2019. And if you have any questions why, just watch one of my weekly shows and you'll hear plenty of reasons why. And not because I'm running scared, but because I want to be able to stay alive and aware and continue to fight and spread awareness, and I want to help, I just want to make sure I'm alive to continue to propagate this message. The last story I want to touch on is Syria. We talked about the Syria withdrawal last week, the announcement of withdrawal from Syria. And wouldn't you know it, it's reported today that U.S. forces will stay in Iraq, and Trump says that they could potentially come back to Syria through Iraq. So technically they won't be in Syria, but they will come back through Iraq if they need to. Trump said he has no plans to withdraw American forces from Iraq a week after announcing a surprise pullout of troops from Syria. The decision allows the United States to maintain a presence in the heart of the Middle East and a bulwark against Iranian influence. This is a key little note here, a bulwark against Iranian influence, because for anybody who has eyes and ears, Trump has stacked his cabinet with neocons, neoconservatives, many of them from the George Bush era, George W. Bush, the same people who brought you 9/11 and brought you the war on terror and the surveillance state and the police state in the early 2000s and set the stage for Obama. One of those guys is John Bolton. I wrote an article, I could find it real quick. Let me see. John Bolton came onto Trump's cabinet, and I wrote an article talking about, well, we can expect an invasion of Iran at some point, because John Bolton is basically just known as the king of constantly promoting invading Iran. He's been doing this for over a decade now. Donald Trump's appointment of John Bolton means regime change is coming to Iran. I wrote that back in March 2018 for Activist Post, and it hasn't happened yet. But in that article, I talk about how if you study the documents of these NGOs, like, for example, the fact that John Bolton's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Also, you talk about the Project for a New American Century. They had a paper called Rebuilding America's Defenses. And there's also the Brookings Institute. They had a document called Which Path to Persia. And all of these plans seem to be still unfolding, because we know, thanks to General Wesley Clark, who told reporters after 9/11 that the United States had a plan to invade 7 nations in the Middle East following 9/11. That was their ultimate plan, and their end game is to get control of Syria and Iran and to control that whole region for them and their allies in Israel and Saudi Arabia. So there's a lot of geopolitical moves going on here. And Trump is withdrawing in some way, which, of course, as I said last week, is overall a good thing, but it remains to be seen if that's truly what's going on. Of course, it is great to see the mainstream media, the artists formerly known as the mainstream media, what I like to call the deadstream media, because everything they spew is dead and dying and decay. And if you listen to it, that's what it results in, death and ignorance. The deadstream media freaking out at the possibility of peace and not having war, right? So some other interesting aspects about this, though, is this week, once Trump announced that the troops are pulling out, all of a sudden Israel starts dropping bombs in Syria, and Russia warns Israel to, like, hey, watch it, back off, because you're going to kill some civilians. I think there was an article talking about how Russia was warning Israel to watch out, and now you're seeing Israel take a role as soon as the United States says they're going to step away, right? And that's because, if you don't know, guys, the United States, like many big nations, is bound to Israel for one reason or another. Lots of people speculate and have their theories on why, but lots of big, powerful countries, they bow at the feet of Israel and Saudi Arabia. And it's an interesting but dangerous situation. People and in the United States, it's untenable to be a politician and to actually question Israel. Most people who do so, their career is over, right? And definitely you can't be a conservative or Republican and actually question Israel, the influence of Israel. You have to do your own research to find out why. But John Bolton, all these people are close to Israel and these Zionists, and they want to get rid of Iran. And that's what this end game is about. So whether the United States pulls out or not, the United States is still funneling weapons to their allies in the Middle East who want to take Syria down and want to take Iran down, and that's a part of the world order that they're trying to erect. So I don't know. We'll have to wait to see how things continue in that region. Yeah, we're at 50 minutes today, 51 minutes. We got a couple minutes left. If there are questions, I'll check on Facebook and YouTube. The last thing I just want to mention to you guys, this is a really key aspect of the philosophy and the message that I promote. This is an article by a friend of mine called Jeffrey Tucker. It's called What Self-Ownership Means and Why It Matters. And it's too long to get into right now, but it's definitely worth your time. And it talks about John Locke, gives you a little bit of history and what it means to own yourself. And I would love for all of you guys to check that out. I'll just give you my little breakdown on it, but essentially it's the fact that we own the fruits of our labor. We own, when it comes to John Locke, the idea that we own anything that we homestead, that we mix with ourselves and our products, right? That we make of ourselves. And not only that, but that no one has a right to tell you as a free, empowered individual how to live your life. And it's wrong, immoral, unethical to use force or violence to try to force your view on people and force them to live a certain way or to try to control them anyway, right? These are values that I hold near and dear, and it's important for us to understand that, right? And the problem with a lot of the things we discussed tonight, so for example, let's say the 5G thing. The government, local to federal, doesn't believe in your self-ownership. They don't believe you have a right to decide what's best for you. And so they go install towers right on your street, and they're willing to tear up your block or do whatever the heck they need to do to get their way, because you are just a number to them. You're just a piece. To them, only the collective exists. So if it's good for the city of Houston or the United States of America, then they will build the 5G network. If it's bad for Bob and Jane and Derek, well, that's just breaking a couple of eggs on the way to making an omelet, right? Like the collective, the end goal is what matter. And that's crazy. Like, it's completely irrelevant to, the facts of life and just good and decent, relationships. And I want all relationships to be voluntary and consensual. And so what that means that somebody should come to me and should speak to me and at least give me an opportunity to communicate my desires and my views on how I feel about this situation, how I feel, it's just, my point is that's disrespecting of self-ownership, right? Let's look at the food products. Let's look at the labeling of genetically modified foods. The federal government coming in and saying that they're going to usurp even if I don't want the city council to decide for me, right? But let's say I'd say the city council deciding what to do in my city and giving the people a vote You know, as silly as I think voting is in a lot of ways, I would respect that a lot more than the feds coming in and saying, hey, we're going to now tell you how you have to live and how you know, what your food can be labeled like and these kinds of things. So all of those are examples of disrespecting individuals' self-ownership, individual sovereignty. I talked a lot to, you know, recently in I've been reading audiobooks. For those who are not aware, I've read now, I'm almost done with my third book, reading the audiobooks on our channels. And I've been talking about the sovereignty of the individual and what it means to be a sovereign person and how we respect that in our relationships, and what it means to have consensual voluntary relationships where we consider what the other person, you know, what the other person's needs are, what the other person's values are. We come to an agreement as opposed to using force and violence. I know there are some of you out there who watch these things and think that force and violence is going to be necessary in the future, and the only way change can ever happen is if we, you know, we have to water the tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants, or we have to like purge. There's just this chaos in some of you, or this pain, which I feel. I mean, it's deep within the human psyche. I think it's deep within the human experience in our collective consciousness. This pain, this trauma, this epigenetic generational trauma. So I get it. But if we give into those values and those yearning for release, and we do that in this way that turns us into the monsters we've been fighting, then we lose. We lose. We would never create a better world and something new that's never been done, if that's your goal, and that's my goal, if we use the methods of the past. And that's why I support agorism and counter-economics, because it's about consistency from words and actions. That's why I support the ideas of the Buddha, who said that watch your thoughts, because your thoughts become your words become your actions become your behavior, and your behavior become your destiny. He was talking about consistency from one to the next. So you don't just talk a good game in your head or on the internet, but actually in the way you live your life, and using these values day to day. That's what holistic anarchism is about. That's what this movement, this idea is all about, is combining, you know, what we would like to see in the world and in living it as true as possible. Of course, none of us can be perfect, but working towards that. And, you know, I think that's important. That's the only thing that really matters. And after, you know, I think I've gained a little bit of experience now in going into my 9th year doing this, after completing 2 U.S. tours and speaking to all kinds of people around the U.S. and in Mexico and Costa Rica and Spain and Portugal, and doing thousands of videos over the years, that I see, for my judgment, the only way we're ever actually going to create change is if we start using concepts like I've talked about over the past couple of years, freedom cells. I've recently been promoting freedom cells, but getting organized on a local level, decentralizing, unplugging, and opting out from these systems so that we can actually create the world we want to see. We don't simply, you know, go wait for the vote to be put, for something to put somebody in front of us that we can vote on, or wait for the day that we can throw a brick through a Starbucks window, or, you know, just wait for the president to fix things, or wait for the white hats to fix things, or wait for the disclosure, or wait for anything. If we keep waiting, you are screwing over the future generations. You're screwing over the 7th generation. I believe in the indigenous principles of the 7th generation and beyond, where we have to think about the effects of our actions and the results of our actions. We have to be forward thinking, not reactionary. Don't allow yourself to be trapped in fear and to be reactionary. Think about what you want to leave the world like, even when you're not here. Think about the results of your actions and who they will affect in the future, and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, all the way on to the 7th generation and beyond. Are the things you're doing today laying a foundation for them that is going to be something of value, that is going to help them have a world that is more free? Or are you literally just sitting there and doing nothing and complaining and watching the world be destroyed around you, and privacy being destroyed, and freedom and health being destroyed around you, and doing nothing while that takes place, so that the coming generations are going to have to deal with the results of our apathy and of our complacency and our ignorance? Or are you unplugging every day, mentally, physically, spiritually? Are you creating new systems? Are you learning new skills? Are you teaching yourself new skills and teaching the young ones around you, and coming together and connecting digitally and physically? Because, you know, Facebook is a great tool, but if we just use Facebook to just come together and congregate and create our little circle jerks online, and if we don't do anything with that, then none of it matters, right? Just the same way I've said, if we have these big, great festivals and people come together with alternative thinking and anarchist, libertarianism, whatever kinds of ideas, alternative ways that people want to dream of, but we just come together and have a good time, and then at the end of the weekend or the festival, everybody just goes back to doing whatever, or everybody comes together on Facebook, but then at the end of the day just goes back to doing the same old thing, supporting the same systems, supporting the same government programs, supporting the same corporations through your dollar, through your time, and through your energy, including Facebook, then nothing will change. Nothing will change. Nothing is going to change as long as you keep fucking sitting here and watching me and doing nothing else. Nothing will change. I'm sorry, friends. Change is going to have to start here, and it's going to have to start in your hands, in your mind, in your heart, and it can't come from me. I can offer ideas. I can offer my tips and my things. We can work together. We can collaborate, but it's not going to happen by sitting around and doing nothing and bitching and forming new Facebook groups or new Facebook pages or new Twitter accounts, or those things are no longer effective. Even if we're still getting our likes and whatnot, we're still not growing on those platforms. We're not growing, and it's killing our soul. It's making us addicted to it, and it's a part of the system they created. So, what are the solutions? Well, I wrote 3 books about solutions. That's why I'm putting them out there on audiobooks, because I'm sick of people saying that there's no solutions out there. So if you haven't read the books, listen to the audiobooks. If you haven't watched the videos, watch the videos. I'm asking you to take some time, yes, to consume some of my content, to get a little educated about the ideas I have, and then from there, create your own. Take those ideas and make them your own. Look at your local community and look for the needs that are there. What are the resources in your community? What are the needs? What are the opportunities you have? How can you build local power? How can you take power away from the people that are trying to claim that they're in power? They think that they're power, but they're not power. They're violence, they're ignorance, they're greed, they are corporations, they're violence, they're coercion, but you are power. You are power. We are power. Only us together connected are true power. And until we realize that, then I fear, my friends, that nothing will change. And I end this 2018 with you guys with a great hope that we can truly change the world. But I seriously mean that going into 2019, only if we take action in our lives and start unplugging from these systems and prepare for the worst but hope for the best, and connect locally, and also get yourself right in your heart and mind. And that's the only way. I mean, I'm going to keep repeating it. I'm not going to give up, even though I'm not going to be on Facebook anymore. I'm going to keep broadcasting. I'm going to keep posting on theconsciousresistance.com. I'm going to keep making documentaries. I'm going to keep writing essays. I'm going to keep writing articles. I'm going to keep going to city council. I'm going to keep touring. I'm going to keep speaking wherever I can. I'm going to do everything I can to keep communicating this message of sovereignty of the individual, of permaculture, and of agorism, of counter-economics, of unplugging from the state and building something better, because we can't take what they have given us. We can't take the game of the oppressors and think that we're going to be able to create something new. We have to reject their game and stop participating in evil and build something better. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm done for the night. I will go through and check all the YouTube comments and respond to some of you guys. I'll be on there for the next 20 or 30 minutes responding to you guys. I'll check out the Facebook broadcast as well. I very much appreciate your time, your energy, and everything that you do, because I hope that you're doing something. We got to do something. We got to find ways to work together. And if you haven't seen our videos about the intentional community, check out the channel as soon as this video ends. And again, email me if you got ideas on intentional communities outside the US, or you want to collaborate together in some way. So, yeah, you guys know the drill. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, you are free. Peace.